think a good place to start talking about archaeology, given what we know about what came before, is something called the Upper Paleolithic of Europe. And the only reason we're starting with Europe is because it's not because it represents the earliest very modern human behavior, but because it is the best preserved. The very earliest modern human behavior is found in Africa, with examples of decorated red ochre crayons and what look like paint palettes, which are basically seashells which are packed full of red ochre and were probably used to decorate things. Also, the very earliest human-like forms occur in Africa, and these are intermediate between archaic humans and modern humans. They're still kind of robust, but they have that domed cranial vault that you see in us today. So the Upper Paleolithic refers to a time period around 40 to 50,000 years ago and ending around 10 to 12,000 years ago. Sometimes you'll see this term AMH. It simply refers to anatomically modern humans. And when we talk about the Upper Paleolithic, we're talking about people that were indistinguishable in terms of morphology, in terms of how they look, from people today. Also, sometimes you'll hear the term Cro-Magnon. Cro-Magnon just refers to modern day people in the Upper Paleolithic. It's a very old term and people just don't use it anymore. Sometimes people think about these early people as not being very sophisticated, but in fact, they had very complex tool making, they had elaborate burials, tailored or sewn clothing. They were interested in how they looked, and there's lots of jewelry and evidence for personal adornment. There's organized settlements, as well as something called representational art. So they show something in the archaeological record that you don't see with Neanderthals, or any types of archaic humans before them. This doesn't at all imply that they were in any way stupider than we are. They were probably as intelligent as we are, and probably had as complex worldviews as we have today. We, of course, today, especially within the last few hundred years, have incredibly sophisticated technology. But when you think about it, a lot of stuff had to occur before we could achieve things like iPads and cell phones. It didn't happen overnight, and this is the beginning of that technological trajectory. Here's just a quick look at some of these modern human sites in Europe. We talked about hunter-gatherers early on in the year, and everyone during the Upper Paleolithic was a hunter-gatherer, and everyone on the planet now has ancestors that were hunter-gatherers. So the Upper Paleolithic really refers to a change in technology and a change in behavior, and it occurred during this long time period from around 2 million years ago to around 10,000 years ago, called the Pleistocene. So the Upper Paleolithic occurred during the Pleistocene, the Ice Ages. Animals that were living during this time bear no resemblance to the animals that are living in Europe today. So Paleolithic humans were living right alongside lions and woolly rhino and mammoth and reindeer, bison, and giant cave bears. One technological innovation was something called blades. So blades are very thin flakes that are removed from a core, and they're typically twice as long as they are wide. And what this does is it economizes the use of stone or raw material, because you can get a lot more cutting edge per weight with one of these very thin blades than you can with something like an Acheulean hand axe. And they can be used for any number of tools. So you can take these blades as a kind of template and form them into different tools. You can make other tools with them like harpoons or bone needles. Another technological innovation is something called the Atlatl or spear thrower. And what this did is it extends your arm about 24 inches and allows you to get some distance away from your prey. And you can see where this would confer an advantage to a hunter over something like a thrusting spear.
It's not a big green mammoth.
So here's how you would grip an atlatl. It's a pretty simple tool. It's basically a stick with a spur on the end to which the dart fits in. And it acts as a lever and gives you more accuracy and more force than you could if you were just using a thrusting spear or a throwing spear. And they were elaborately decorated with the fauna, or the animals of the time. Things like mammoth and bison and different types of antelope. Sometimes we envision these people as, running around in fur underwear. This seems like a really unlikely scenario. Judging from the bone and ivory needles that are found on Upper Paleolithic archaeological sites, we know that people wore tailored clothing and certainly would have to be really good at it in order to survive extreme temperatures during the Pleistocene. And they were interested in how they looked and how they were being perceived by other people. Flutes that were made from mammoth ivory and bird bones have been discovered dating to around 30,000 years ago, and so we know that they had music, and they almost certainly had things like drums as well.